Today we're covering installation of a loaded strut assembly. We'll install these Duralast Loaded Strut assemblies in the front of this 2004 Acura MDX and some shocks in the rear for a complete suspension job. Now with a loaded strut assembly, you don't have to take the assembly apart to get to the strut. Instead of taking the old assembly out, then removing just the spring from the strut, you get to put in this whole new assembly. That's a new strut mount, insulator, dust boot, new coil spring, and the strut itself. With the loaded strut assembly, that's all in one piece. Now you can do this job at home with hand tools. You'll need a torque wrench. You can get that at AutoZone through Loan a Tool, a 1/2-inch breaker bar, screwdriver, 6mm Allen wrench, hammer, punch, 1/2-inch ratchet, 3/8-inch ratchet, 36mm deep socket, 19mm deep socket, 15mm deep socket, 14mm deep socket, 17mm socket for the 1/2-inch, a 17mm socket for the 3/8-inch, a 12mm socket, a 10mm socket, 17mm combo wrench, a 22mm combo wrench, and some glasses and gloves. Now you may also want a rust penetrant like PV Blaster. For the front of the car, break the lug nuts, raise the car using a hydraulic jack, and insert a jack stand to secure part of the frame. Now just remove the lug nuts and the wheel. You may want to spray some PV Blaster here, especially on the sway bar link. Now let's break loose the axle nut and remove it. This is where you need to use the big 36mm socket. You may need to use a punch and a mallet to help here as well. Now use the 17mm wrench with the 16mm Allen to loosen the sway bar link nut. And now you'll remove the brake line with a 12mm socket. You just pull the bolt out here and wiggle the line a little to make sure it's slack. Use a 10mm socket to remove the wheel speed sensor. Now onto the strut assembly. I'm going to break, loosen, and remove the two bottom bolts with a 22mm socket and the 1/2-inch ratchet. We need to wiggle the spindle assembly a little bit to help get the bolts out. Now remove the sway bar link. You may need a punch to encourage it here. To get to the top of the assembly, you'll need to pop open 3 plastic access points with a screwdriver. If this isn't enough access, you can get to them just by pulling off the cowl. It's attached through the weather strip. Once you've got that off, you can access the top nuts. We'll use a 14mm socket to remove the 3 top nuts. When removing the last nut, hold or support the strut so it doesn't drop. Now you just install the new assembly. Our new nuts required a 15mm socket. The new nuts will be made to fit the new assembly that you get, and some variance is not uncommon. Now let's put that cowl back on. Just line up the pins on the weather strip and push them through. Push the knuckle up to the bottom of the strut assembly to install the 2 lower bolts. And now you tighten the nuts on those bolts with a 22mm socket. Now we reattach the wheel speed sensor. Now we reattach the brake line. We reinstall the sway bar link. And we reinstall the axle nut. You may need a punch and a hammer once you start torquing it. Now put the tire back on Do the other side and you're ready to move to the rear. For the rear install, remove the wheel following the same procedures you did on the front. Now we're going to remove the top bolt on this shock, compress the shock and slide it out. Now we've got a bottom nut and a washer hooked up to a stud, so we'll take those off and then wiggle the shock off of that stud. Now we'll grab our new shock and slide the bottom onto the stud. We're going to want to compress this shock to install it in the top. Once we get it installed correctly, we're going to install the top bolt. You may need a mallet to help with this. And then on the bottom, we'll install the washer and finish with the nut. Once you've got all this, you just replace the wheel, repeat on the other side, and you're done. Remember, after any time you've done a suspension job, it's a good idea to get an alignment check and do a test drive to make sure everything's okay. Enjoy your new suspension.